Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign and the Democratic National Committee plan to transfer nearly $25 million to support down-ballot Democratic candidates in state and federal races this year, a significant boost to those efforts following record fundraising for her campaign this summer. Well, speaking of record fundraising, the Harris Wall campaign has raised $540 million in just 6 weeks, leaving the Harris operation with more than 2,000 staff and 312 offices in the battleground states in partnership with the Democratic National Committee. Now, this is a far bigger footprint than the Trump campaign, which has put less emphasis on field organizing. And years before he became the Republican vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance endorsed a little-noticed 2017 report by the Heritage Foundation that proposed a sweeping conservative agenda to restrict sexual and reproductive freedoms and remake American families. This report praised the rapidly expanding number of state laws restricting abortion rights and access, saying that the procedure should become unthinkable in America. And they cited hunger as a great motivation for Americans to find work. And President Biden yesterday said he did not think Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had done enough to secure a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. Now, these comments come after the discovery of 6 hostages who were executed by Hamas, including the 23-year-old American-Israeli Hersh Goldberg Poland, whose parents had publicly pled for his return at the Democratic National Convention. And the British government is defending its decision to restrict some arms sales to Israel. Now, this is amid growing domestic and international criticism. They say we've made this judgment as a result of the process. They said they have suspended 30 to 250 arms export licenses where the government believes there's a risk that the arms may be used in serious violation of international humanitarian law in Gaza. And Donald Trump on Sunday called into his favorite news station, or was on his favorite news station, Fox, and he was trying to defend himself from the criminal charges he's facing in the election interference cases that have been filed against him in both federal and state court. But according to legal experts and pundits, it sounded more like a confession. He was bragging on Fox that his poll numbers go up every time he's indicted. He said, and quote, "Whoever heard you get indicted for interfering with a presidential election where you have every right to do so. If you get indicted and your poll numbers go up," he said. Well, the reality is he doesn't. No one has a right to interfere in a presidential election, and that interference is a crime, which is why he has been charged in several cases. And VP Kamala Harris is expected to unveil new proposals meant to boost small businesses and entrepreneurs. Now, this is ahead of a campaign speech she's going to give in New Hampshire tomorrow. Now, with days until the first debate between Trump and Harris and her efforts to draw a contrast with his call for a lower corporate tax rate. Advisors to the Harris campaign says she's also going to discuss plans to bolster the safety net, such as through using child care or paid leave expansions alongside tax proposals that will have a dramatic impact on working class families. And finally, in the news today, prosecutors in New York are urging the judge presiding over Trump's hush money case not to allow his last-ditch effort to move the case to federal court or to delay proceedings in that criminal case. Lawyers for Trump have filed a motion in federal court seeking to move the state prosecution to a federal jurisdiction. A federal judge rejected a similar attempt last year, but Trump's attorneys are arguing that the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity in a separate criminal case gives them the right to now request that the state criminal case be halted and that it be moved or removed to federal court. This is the news of the day, and this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of the Areva Martin in real time show, and this is the hour where we go a little deeper, where we dig behind those headlines and bring you those headline makers, those people who are making news. And today in this hour, we're going to be talking about those Zoom calls. You may have been invited not once, not twice, but multiple times to the various Zoom calls that have been organized to support the Harris and Walz campaign. Some of these calls literally breaking the internet. A call involving white women had over 100,000 people, raised over $8 million. And then there's the call that happened on the night that Kamala Harris, July 21st, that is, threw her hat into the ring and said, "I'm ready. I want to be your 47th president." That night, Joteka Edie, CEO and founder of Full Circle Strategies and organizer of Win with Black Women, she convened 40,000 African-American women, and I'm sure some allies, on a call where they raised over $1 million and started something which has become a regular weekly call with elected officials, community leaders, and others who are organizing around the Harris and Walz campaign. Well, this phenomenon, these Zoom calls, we've seen them with South Asian women, Latinas, Native women, white men, Black queer men, different groups, different ethnic groups, and different identity groups are using these calls as a way to bring people together as well as raise substantial money for the campaign. Caretha Mitchell, she's a professor at Boston University, was intrigued by this, so much so that she wrote a really insightful article for Times Magazine. So in this hour, I'm going to be talking to Professor Mitchell and Joteka about what we are witnessing, these Zoom calls. Why are they so effective? How do you maintain the momentum of some of these earlier calls all the way to the election in November? And what can we expect going forward in terms of elections? Is this going to be the new way that we organize voters, and even the new way that we raise millions of dollars for candidates? And might this work for some of these down ballot races, not just the presidential race? I got lots of questions for our guest in this hour, so make sure you stick around when we come forward. The Zoom calls that are changing the game for the Harris-Walz presidential campaign. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580. Tabitha Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition. With powerful new contributions from today's leading voices, this 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later today.
So the thing no one tells you about periods is that your flow changes every day, and so should your tampon size. Tampax has 5 absorbencies to match your changing flow. If it's uncomfortable to remove, go down a size. If it leaks, go up a size. And only Tampax has a leak guard braid to help give you up to 100% leak and odor-free protection. All-day comfort and protection for up to 8 hours for under $5 a month. Based on average U.S. consumer usage at manufacturer's suggested price, however, pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer, excludes 8-count packs.
Mommy, want to play a game with me and Dad?
Mommy's not feeling good.
You need to vaporize that cold.
Vaporize?
Yeah, with Dayquil VapoCool. It's Dayquil plus a rush of Vicks vapors.
Whoa.
Come on, honey. Let's let mommy rest.
You guys are amazing. And so is Dayquil VapoCool.
Dayquil VapoCool, the vaporizing daytime coughing, aching, fever, power through your day medicine. And to vaporize sore throat pain, try Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA reminds you that when we fight, we win, and we don't black down. LA Community Action Network, or LA CAN, was formed in 1999 when 25 residents of downtown LA came together and acknowledged the problems that existed in their community and made a commitment to do something about those problems, to stand together, organize, and become a force in the community that demands change. Civil rights and preventing the criminalization of poverty are their core projects. In addition, they take on women's rights, the human right to housing, and healthy food access. LA CAN also has projects focused on economic development, civic participation, voter engagement, and community media. While downtown LA remains their home base, with a particular emphasis on the Skid Row community, in 2007, they expanded their housing and healthy food access work into South Central Los Angeles. LA Can believes that power for low-income people and people of color is achieved through a large, active, and well-informed member base that utilizes a multitude of methods to advance their messages and goals. If you'd like to join the Los Angeles Community Action Network and organize people to fight back against oppression, please visit cangress.org. That's cangress.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and in this hour, we're talking about these Zoom calls that thousands of people across the country are joining every night, how they are changing the game for the Harris Walls campaign, also how they are raising millions and millions of dollars. You might have been invited to one of these calls on July 21st when Kamala Harris said she was throwing her hat into the ring to be the 47th president of the United States. Joteka Edie, CEO and founder of Full Circle Strategies, an organizer of Win with Black Women, organized a call that had over 40,000 women, raised over $1 million. And she hasn't stopped yet. There are calls happening with Win with Black Women every week. There have been other calls involving Black queer men, South Asian women, Latinas, Native women, white men, and some say this is just the tip of the iceberg. Professor Caretha Mitchell has written about what we are witnessing with all of these Zoom calls. That article, very insightful article, was published by Times Magazine recently. Happy to have both of you here. Welcome, Dr. Mitchell, and welcome, Joteka. First, I want to start with you, Joteka. A lot of folks think that in a couple of hours, you were able to organize 40,000 women. But talk to us about the organizing you have been doing long before we got the news that Joe Biden was stepping down and Kamala Harris was going to be running for president.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. Such a deep appreciation for your work and advocacy, and always glad to be here on this amazing show. The question that you ask about the work of organizing, I think it predates me, and it's been the work of Black women for so long in the political arena, but just really across the country. And so Black women, we have been organizing for years. We have, long been doing this work. I don't think at the recognition levels that we are receiving now that we are receiving, but Win with Black Women particularly had been around for 4 years, and we meet on most Sunday nights. And so the meeting on July 21st was a regularly scheduled Win with Black Women Sunday night call. But of course, once we got the news, we knew that we needed to change the agenda. We needed to speak to the times and the moment. And we knew that there were three things. One, we wanted to just be in a moment of gratitude to President Biden, because what President Biden has done, he has ushered in history. He is a president that I believe has saw and has centered and has lifted up the leadership and brilliance of Black women throughout his administration, throughout his career, quite frankly. And he did that. Second, we knew that we wanted to galvanize behind Vice President Kamala Harris and send a very clear message that for anyone who thought that we were going to try to have any other conversation outside of Vice President Kamala Harris as a presumptive nominee, for anyone who thought they were going to jump or skip over her and that they were going to become the nominee and that somehow that she was going to go away, that they were going to have to jump over a giant wall of Black women and our allies to do so. And third, that we needed to start the work of organizing, which is what we're doing now. We meet on Sunday nights, but we are organizing. There are over 44 state volunteer groups. We knew that we needed to raise money. And so that work led by the amazing Star Jones, who has been a part of Win with Black Women since its inception. We dropped that link at 11:30 p.m. By 1 a.m., we had raised the $1.6 million. We've raised over $2.5 million. And as you said at the top of the show, we have inspired so many others to do the same. And they have had calls, and there have literally been hundreds of thousands of people. We're tracking over 130 of these calls, ranging from the Swifties for Kamala, cooking, the comics, the dogs and the cats, the cat lady, the adventurers, the dreadheads, the white dudes, the white women, the Black men, for Kamala and have raised now well over $20 million. And it just shows the power of just getting out there and doing something, knowing our power as individuals, not waiting for someone to appoint us to do something, but just stepping out there and doing it. And Black women have been doing that for a very long time. And so I think a lot of people see the call on the 21st. They think, oh, we just did that in 3 hours. No, we had laid a foundation for 4 years where we had been doing that work. Now, certainly it was a special moment, and we had 44,000 on Zoom and another 50,000 that we can count that were in other spaces, because as unlike the other Zoom calls that took place after ours, our Zoom opened up in real time. Like, we were expecting 1,000 people, and we had 44,000 on Zoom. We had 30,000 in Clubhouse, 20,000 on conference call lines and other Zooms and other places. And so it's just been a testament of the work. And I am just honored to see Black women's leadership and Black women's our work honored and centered in this moment.
Let me ask you this, Shotega. 4 years. Thank you for laying that foundation, because like I said, a lot of people think, oh my God, in 3 hours, as you said, they put this call together, which we now know is close to 100,000 people. What would a typical Sunday night call have been like had this news, and I want to go back even before Joe Biden announced that he was running for president. So, let's say the first year of his presidency and Kamala Harris's vice presidency, what were your typical Sunday night calls like?
Oh, they ranged anywhere up to 1,000 people, because we would meet in Zoom Meet. And so I spent years in Silicon Valley as an executive there. So I know a lot about Zooms and technology. And so Zoom technology allows, in the meeting format, for you to have up to 1,000 participants. In webinar, you can have, at one point it was up to 100,000. It was moved up to more than that. And as a result of our calls, Zoom has now recently announced the ability to have 1 million. And so that's also the business impact that our calls have been making. It's just really great to see that happen. But it would be anywhere up to 1,000 people. And they always feel like, I always call it.
What would you be talking about? Because there was no race for presidency the first year that Biden and Harris were in office. So what would be the typical topic, in that first year of their presidency?
So the first year that we started, it actually was during the 2020 presidential campaign. So we came together because we were collectively concerned and outraged as it related to who was going to be the narrative around who was going to be the vice president of the United States. Every Black woman who had been named in that process, if you probably could remember, there were just racist, sexist attacks. They were too ambitious. They were trying to pit the Black women against each other. And we were very clear that not on our watch, not in this moment, would we as Black women from across the country be concerned. And this was also during the pandemic, which, because we were in the pandemic, probably that first meeting would have likely looked like a DC-based meeting with DC operatives. But because we were in the pandemic, and because of the nature of that meeting, I'll never forget that night. I was watching the news, and I watched a video by Bishop Leah Daughtry, and then I was like, I agree with her. I called my friend Mignon Moore, and I said, Mignon, what are you all going to do? Meaning the colored girls, the famed political colored girls. And she was like, well, what are you going to do? Meaning, what is your generation going to do? What are the Joteka Edie's, the Angela Rye's, the Tamika Mallory's, the Brittany Patton Cunningham's, the Reverend Siobhan Arline Bradley's? What are y'all going to do? And so I took me like 20 minutes to gather myself and say, she's right. And I sent an email to 65 friends. And I have had the privilege and blessing of working across various fields. So whether I've been in Silicon Valley in tech, or my time at the NAACP, or in politics or entertainment, and it was a wide array. And that night, 90 of us got on a call around that collective concern. We wrote an open letter. 2 days later, there were more than 2,500 and up to 4,500 women that signed that open letter. And then we decided to keep moving. And so a typical Sunday night, it was in joy and love. We had a good time. We opened in the spirit. We close in the spirit. We have something called after hours, where just Black women are just on a Zoom call, just laughing and talking, everything from a strategy session to a therapy session to a dating session.
All right.
And we have had some of the most profound Black women that have been a part of Win with Black Women. And we all sort of take turns going on the stage and we champion those issues, whether it's the WNBA Players Association and the work following their leadership to help bring Black women's voice to the forefront around bringing Brittany Griner home, or whether it's Black women following the leadership of executives in the entertainment industry to buy out 100 theaters for The Little Mermaid, to show that we do need to have representation in Hollywood, or whether or not it's working to ensure that countless Black women are confirmed in the Biden-Harris administration, whether that's Dr. Lisa Cook, who is now the first Black woman to be governor on the Federal Reserve Board, or whether or not that is Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is the first Black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court, and so much in between. Win with Black Women, I like to call a collective love letter to Black women from Black women.
Yeah, so Dr. Mitchell, jump in here. You wrote this article. Obviously, you witnessed what Jateka has just laid out so eloquently. What is moving you, or what moved you about what you witnessed in this moment about these Zoom calls and the way that people have come together to organize?
Yes, thank you so much, first of all, for having me. And what an absolute honor to share the space with not only you, Areva Martin, but also Joteka Edie. You're exactly right, Areva. I was absolutely blown away. So when Joteka created that first Zoom, I was getting text messages about getting on. And I was actually at home in Houston visiting my family. And so I wasn't able to get on that meeting, but I saw all of the texts talking about, okay, now we're going to open to this size and this size and this size. So I knew how much it was exploding in real time. And I have to say, first of all, that especially now hearing everything that Joteka Edie had to say, I'm struck by the fact that she began by saying, please remember that this kind of activism began before me, right? My work has focused on Black women in the 1890s through the 1930s. And part of what had me so excited about what I witnessed and what I've been witnessing is that Joteka Edie and all of those sisters are very much in the tradition of Black club women of the 1890s through the 1930s. And so part of what has been so powerful for me to witness this is to see how other groups are recognizing the leadership of Black women. Because part of what is striking, even in recent history, is that Black women have always made the call. They have always led the way, but very often, as an example from the 2020 election and 2016 as well, white women who were getting in the fray actually were doing it in hiding. Watch Joteka Edie and the others do it in public, and then watch white women and other groups do it in public is what's powerful and made me pitch that piece for Time magazine. So the bottom line for me is what we're witnessing is people who are in privileged identity categories like white women and white men. They are recognizing that their specific identity is valuable because we are in an unjust society, and they can use their specific identity to be in coalition with Black women and others. And that is what is so exciting about watching people claim their own identity and then linking their own identity to others.
Well, you know what was so interesting to me, Dr. Mitchell, about your article was you talked about identity politics, and there being a period in this country where that would have been, or identity politics, you know, were looked at negatively. It would have been negative for you to lean into a Black women or Black queer men or Latino women, to lean into your identity and organize around that identity. And even when you think of this divided world that we live in, right, this divided nation, all the attacks on DEI, all the lawsuits by white people saying that sitting in a DEI class in the workplace is a form of discrimination, or they feel discriminated against, you know, when they have to hear about white supremacy, white privilege, you know, white hierarchy. The fact that there are white people, as evidenced by that white women's call, and I had the organizers of that call on a couple of weeks ago, and there are white men, you know, white dudes, I think they called it for Harris, who aren't afraid, even in this moment, even when you
Yes.
juxtapose the attacks on DEI and the cries of white people saying they're being discriminated against. Help us understand these two things existing at the same time.
First of all, it's important to recognize that identity politics is actually not a bad word, but it's been turned into a bad word. So we should think about that as similar to critical race theory or DEI more generally. But also, what we're watching is the backlash to the success of people recognizing that their identity matters. And so to have people feel silenced around their identity was a backlash. The more progress that we've made with DEI initiatives, the more people have recognized, oh, there's a power differential here, and I can use my privilege to help other people. That tendency is what the backlash has been about. And so what we're watching is good and decent, regular people push back against the backlash. And that's why I'm so excited about it. We're all owning our identity and using it in coalition.
Yeah, when we come forward, Jateka Edie is here, Dr. Caretha Mitchell. We're talking about these Zoom calls that are literally bringing together hundreds of thousands of people. Now, Jateka says Zoom has responded and that you will literally be able to get 1 million people on a call to organize for a political campaign. How to keep this momentum going, particularly given how divided we are as a country. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580, when we come forward.
More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. President Biden says the U.S. has gone from an economic crisis to the strongest economy in the world. Speaking at the kickoff event of the Investing in America content series, Biden touted what his administration has done since he took office to help boost the economy. The president said inflation continues to come down and there's been record small business growth. He added he signed legislation that brought chip factories back to the U.S. Wayne County, Michigan's new criminal justice center is now open. Wayne County Executive Warren C. Evans, who is Black, says the facility represents their unwavering commitment to a more efficient justice system for all. The facility now centralizes the county's criminal justice operations with a jail and juvenile detention center in one building. The process of opening the building has taken 13 years and at least $500 million. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Heavy traffic continues for those in Norwalk as a stalled big rig blocks the right lane of the 605 north after Firestone Boulevard, with a backup running heavy from Rosecrans Avenue. Industries 605 south before Peck Road, expected 25-minute backup from Valley Boulevard as an accident blocks the left lane. Downtown LA's 10 West after Mateo Street, Santa Fe Avenue split has an accident in the center lane, which is blocked with a 10-minute delay and backup from the 5-101 interchange. And in Santa Clarita on the 14 north at Placerita Canyon Road, an accident blocks the right shoulder, and at times lanes are temporarily stopped with a backup from Balboa Boulevard, San Fernando Road interchange.
September 15th to 21st is Asthma Peak Week with the highest concentration of asthma flare-ups and hospitalizations. To become a more active participant in your care, visit luma-edu.com. This message is brought to you by Amgen and AstraZeneca.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA, a national nonprofit, offers more than 1,000 free online resources for youth and high school sports coaches, parents, students, and administrators. Visit PCADevZone.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The National Football League is approaching a very special milestone this season. When the regular season kicks off Thursday night, an unprecedented 15 teams will be starting a black quarterback. That's almost half of the NFL's 32 teams. Here are the 15 black quarterbacks we will see in the starting lineup this week. Jacoby Brissett, New England Patriots. Rookie Jaden Daniels, Washington Commanders. Jalen Hurts, Philadelphia Eagles. Lamar Jackson, Baltimore Ravens. Jordan Love, Green Bay Packers. Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs. Kyler Murray, Arizona Cardinals. Dak Prescott, Dallas Cowboys. Anthony Richardson, Indianapolis Colts. Geno Smith, Seattle Seahawks. C.J. Stroud, Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson, Cleveland Browns. Rookie Caleb Williams, Chicago Bears. Russell Wilson, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Bryce Young, Carolina Panthers. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
The moment we've all been waiting for has finally arrived. On Tuesday, September 10th at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will square off in their first ever presidential debate. KBLA Talk 1580 and the Empowerment Congress are hosting a viewing party, and we're inviting you to join us for an evening of civic engagement, great food, and good vibes. Our studio space is limited, but if you would like to join us, just go to our website at KBLA1580.com and register for your chance to watch this historic presidential debate with us. Years from now, we're all likely to remember exactly where we were when this pivotal moment in American politics unfolded. So, register for your chance to join us by going to KBLA1580.com right now. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience. By any other name, we demand environmental justice in 2024 and beyond. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Mommy, want to play a game with me and Dad?
Mommy's not feeling good.
You need to vaporize that cold.
Vaporize?
Yeah, with Dayquil VapoCool. It's Dayquil plus a rush of Vicks vapors.
Whoa.
Come on, honey. Let's let mommy rest.
You guys are amazing. And so is Dayquil VapoCool.
Dayquil VapoCool, the vaporizing daytime coughing, aching, fever, power through your day medicine. And to vaporize sore throat pain, try Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
We are back, and Dr. Caretha Mitchell and Joteka Edie are joining me. Joteka, probably, since you have not personally, it was sent on her behalf, an invitation to join her and hundreds of thousands of women who've been meeting on calls, Win with Black Women. I know on July 21st, I was actually in New York when I got the news that Biden was stepping down. I was doing a bunch of interviews and started getting bombarded with emails from friends all over the country, all different ages, socioeconomic classes, all different folks, family members included, telling me about the call, Joteka, and what was happening that night. And I was one of the folks who joined the call as well. How do you keep this momentum going? There's so much excitement around the Harris Walls campaign. Obviously, all these calls that we've been talking about are evidence of that momentum. But how do you keep it going? We got, 60 plus days before this election. Is there any sense that there is Zoom fatigue setting in with respect to any of these calls?
Well, we keep getting new Zooms every day. And I think that it's important to know, I'm an organizer. I've been organizing a strategist for more than 20 years. And certainly we will continue to have Zoom meetings, but we are not going to Zoom our way into a victory on election day. Certainly the work is in communities across this country, and that Zoom will certainly help us gather, inspire, inform us, and give us motivation. But we have to turn that into work that has to be turned into movements on the ground in communities. And that's certainly what we're doing. We are organizing voter registration, and we're seeing a result of that. We see that voter registration amongst Black women, young Black women, is up 175%. that is historic levels. We're seeing a level of enthusiasm. And right before you left, I think what was so important, the conversation that you and Caretha was having, that it is so important. Like this idea of identity is like to lean into who we are. And then one of the things that I'm so grateful to my mother, to the Black women in my life, to my mentors who always told me to be unapologetically a Black woman, be your brilliant, beautiful self. And to be and lean into being a Black woman doesn't mean that I am any less smart, any less great of a strategist, any less dynamic as an individual. It just simply means that I lean into the thing that makes me uniquely who I am. And I am a Black woman. I am a Black woman that grew up on a dirt road in South Carolina. And no one would ever take that from me. And in many ways, that actually helps make me a unique contributor to any table that I am, whether it's been the corporate boardrooms that I have sat in, or whether or not it's been at political tables of which I sat. And I think that goes for Black women across the board. I was having a conversation, ironically, last night with Ross, who organized White Dudes for Kamala. And Ross and I were having a conversation, and we were just talking about, you know, our mutual respect for each other's work. And what he and I both agreed is that, you know, in this moment, particularly this notion of identity politics. And, you know, Professor, I studied political science. So, you know, I understand, like, you know, we all understand like how they try to divide us, and like identity politics would be painted as this bad thing. But in this moment, you know, you look at the frame, that we are segregated and that we're organizing in a segregated manner. I have never felt more close to white men or a Swiftie than I have in ever. I never thought that I would have anything in common with the Swiftie.
Okay, I got to ask you, do we have bracelets with Black women?
We do not have bracelets. We do have T-shirts at a full merch store. You can go to our merch store or our website to find it. But the thing that I will say is that Irene Kim and the Swifties for Kamala, what we do have in common, we have in common our agreement around the future of this country. We certainly have in common what we want to see as relates to our women being able to have the freedom to choose what to do with our bodies in this country. And we're all united around our desire to see Kamala Harris as the 47th president of this country. And it's the same when you think about the adventurers or these other entities that are coming together. We are united around our vision for this country. And I think that's so beautiful. And I see the professor. I am not trying to take your role, Areva, but I see the professor trying to get in there.
No. And I want to ask this question though. So Joteka, you mentioned the Swifties, you mentioned some of the other groups of white dudes. You didn't mention white women. Was that purposeful? Do you feel that same kinship with white women as you feel with the Swifties and some of these other groups?
Absolutely, I do.
Okay.
And
I just wanted to make sure that wasn't an intentional.
No, it was not intentional at all. And Shannon Watts and I actually spent a lot of time talking to each other. I pick up the phone. I talk to her on a regular basis. And we're all about to do something very special together very soon. We'll be making an announcement around something coming very soon that we're super excited to be doing together.
Fantastic. Yeah, jump in, Dr. Mitchell. I know you have some thoughts about this, you know, kind of identity politics, or what people generally, again, paint as negative as being something positive.
Yes, and I so appreciate the way that Joteka just wove all of those different groups together, because the reason that I wrote the piece, Why Identity-Based Zooms Matter, for Time Magazine, is precisely because part of what I believe ordinary white Americans in this country, what they did not take as the lesson from Joe Biden that they should have, is that when you are a good, decent white person, you have been taught that you are good and decent simply because you aren't the one hurling slurs. So when Trump becomes politically relevant by questioning Barack Obama's credentials with birtherism, good, decent white people didn't stand up and say, this isn't our way. When Trump made fun of the reporter with disabilities. We didn't see good and decent white people mobilize as good and decent white people and say, this does not represent us. When he launched his campaign talking about Mexicans or rapists, you didn't see good, decent white people mobilize. And what I believed Joe Biden was doing is he was saying, I'm ordinary Joe, ain't nothing special about me, but I'm going to mobilize to get the country back to a sense of decency. And so what we have watched is white people get that lesson finally. When Joe Biden was pressured to step aside, he recognized that, hey, we had a primary where we had every demographic you can think of represented, and his flaws as a cisgender straight white man, his flaws were on display, but his flaws never became disqualifying. But any flaw for Kamala Harris became disqualifying. Who else was in that? Julian Castro, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, you name every category, and they were there, but their flaws became disqualifying. So what you have watched is Joe Biden recognize that he has a power within his identity as a cisgender straight white man, and I can make the call that I am putting all of my endorsement behind Kamala Harris. We watched him do that, and I want us to recognize that as decent white men that made the path for another decent white man in Tim Walz. So I feel like part of what we're watching, when we saw Shannon Watts pick up the torch from Joteka Edie and say, we have fallen on the job before as white women. We have fallen on that job, but we're going to actually take your leadership, Black women, this time. All of this, to my mind, Areva, is we are watching good, decent white people realize that white villainy is not going to take a break. And you can't just be on the sideline saying, I didn't hurl the racial slur. You got to be in the fight for decency.
You know, it's so interesting you say that. I'm working on a case, reparations matter in Palm Springs, California. And we had an activation, and a young white Episcopalian priest said exactly what you're saying. He said, it's not enough for us to be here in this moment supporting these Black and brown families who are fighting for restitution and fighting for their humanity. You know, I really want to talk about those good white people who were in Palm Springs in the 1950s and 60s, who stood around, who didn't consider themselves racist, but they didn't stand up for those folks in that community that didn't have a voice. So I think you're absolutely right. In this moment, Joe Biden gave white folks permission to do what he did, which was to stand up and say, you know, this is not who we are as Americans. And that message is being heard loud and clear. When we come forward, I want to talk about Stacey Abrams and similarities with Joteka and the work that you're doing. I was having a conversation with Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas, and she wants Texas to become purple, blue, and follow what Stacey Abrams did in terms of how Stacey Abrams is credited for, you know, the wins that we've seen in Georgia for Joe Biden, for those two Democratic senators. I want to see if it is this Zoom organizing strategy, Joteka, that you're using. Can it be a strategy that gets some states like Texas, like Florida, back over in the Dem column? Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580, when we come forward.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to
languages when calling the hotline. Report anonymously by calling 833-866-4283, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or online at any time at cavshate.org.
Looks like Bobby needs a ride again.
Grab the keys.
Let's take Auntie to the swap meet.
Grab the keys.
Whether you're giving rides or hauling gear, do it all in a Chevy SUV. Head to your local Chevy dealer, where well-qualified buyers get 1.9% financing on all 2024 Malibu, Colorado, Blazer, Equinox, Trailblazer, and Traverse limited models. Chevrolet, together, let's drive.
1.9% APR for 36 months. Monthly payment is $28.60 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment 15.8% plus finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available with lease and some other offers. Take new retail delivery by 7/1/24.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally, but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We're back, and Joteka Edie is joining us. She's the CEO and founder of Full Circle Strategy. She's the organizer of Win with Black Women, and she's being credited, rightfully so, with inspiring hundreds of thousands of different identity groups to come together on a Zoom call to support the Harris Walls team, as well as to raise millions of dollars for the campaign. She's working with many of these, I'm going to call them identity/affinity groups, to continue the momentum as we head into the November elections. Also, Dr. Caretha Mitchell is here. She's a professor from Boston University who studies political movements and says what she is witnessing in the work that Joteka is doing is very similar to Black female clubs in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So Joteka was having a conversation this weekend. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was in Los Angeles for an event for the DNC, and I was at that event chatting with her. And she's really, really interested in the work that Stacey Abrams did in Georgia and how she can replicate some of that work in the state of Texas. We see all the crazy politics coming out of Texas, from the governor to the attorney general of that state. We see Florida, which gave us Val Demings as a congresswoman, but even former Congresswoman Val Demings said that Florida lost like 500,000 Democratic voters, which made it impossible for her to win when she ran for Senate in that state. So do you see the work you're doing now as having the potential of turning some of these red states blue, or at least purple?
I think first of all, two women that I love and admire. I've known Stacey Abrams for over 15 years. We've been in the trenches organizing together, and so very much understand the model and the work that Stacey has done so beautifully. And Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, someone else who I also a soror of mine, who was on that Zoom call on July 21st. She was right there with us. And I think that what we have seen is the level of energy that is around the country is that the political map is opening up in different ways. And I think what people are understanding is the power of people. I mean, if you think about 44,000 Black women and our friends and allies on a Zoom, and another 50,000 outside, but all gathered, nearly 100,000 people. And you think about that energy, if you probably could separate everybody out into their states, and what that meant if all of those people voted. And so many elections are won by such a slim margin of error. And I think that what it's going to take to redefine all of our political maps is first just doing away with writing off a state just because it has been traditionally red or blue. And I think we have to invest in a 50-state strategy. And I love the leadership of Jamie Harrison, another good friend at the DNC, that is investing, while certainly you have to concentrate in certain states, but investing in all states because it takes time. I think also it's going to be important to make sure that we are constantly expanding the electorate. We have to saturate voter registration. It's wonderful to see Black women voter registration up 175% and voter registration rates across the board up. But we have to do that in place after place after place after place. And then also making sure that we are protecting the ballot box. The reality is that in Texas, just recently, it was announced that, they've purged thousands of people off the rolls. And so a lot of people will vote. And unfortunately, Election Day is not a holiday in this country. It should be a holiday. But people will go to vote. And sometimes they only have an hour because they don't get the day off to vote. And you are standing in lines that are 7 and 8 hours long, which is done on purpose to limit the resources of people's availability and the resources to vote. And it becomes a clunky process with the express goal of people not being able to cast that ballot. And then when you get there and you find out that you've been purged off the rolls because maybe you hadn't voted in the last 4 years, and now you're excited, and then they tell you have to file a provisional ballot. And so making sure that Congress will pass, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that will fix the broken voting rights laws that we now have as a result of Shelby County versus Holder, which was a Supreme Court case that invalidated sections of the voting rights law in the federal voting rights law, but then also the Freedom to Vote Act, which would actually put into place the ability for those to expand voting to make voting more easy. That's what it's going to take. And then also, it's just going to take really continuing to talk to people for them to understand the power of their vote. I think when I look at the excitement of 30 and 40,000 people showing up to a Harris Walls event and just being excited, like turning those into votes will monumentally change the landscape, and not just the top of the ticket. And I think that's also very important. Who is at your local level is going to matter, sometimes more so than who's at the top of the ticket. Is certainly important. But who's the school board on your school board is going to affect the day-to-day lives of your children. Who is the district attorney is going to affect justice in your country. Because when we look at the case of Ahmaud Arbery, we are all outraged by the fact that this man was murdered in his own neighborhood, just running and jogging, but there was no justice in the case. But then when you look at like that county and you look at that district attorney who was elected into office, who had been elected into office, and that seat had been held by a Republican for nearly 20 years, uncontested. And it was in a place where Black folks and people of color made up nearly 40% of the electorate. And so you begin to ask yourself, well, what if people voted in mass numbers and showed our power? Then we could elect people in the office that could actually enact change that affects our lives and also was in alignment with our values. So I do think that we could change the political map. I think it's possible. And I think if anybody could do it, Jasmine Crockett could certainly do it in Texas. And I think there are 50 Jasmine Crockett's across the country and multiples of those that are actually doing work every day on the ground to do the type of strategy that Stacey put into place to turn Georgia purple and blue.
Yeah, and what do you think, Dr. Mitchell, kind of going forward? You're a historian of sorts, you're a political scientist. You have noted this movement, and you've made the comparison to Black women's clubs in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. If you had a crystal ball and could look, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, do you think this way of organizing, whether it's Zoom or some other platform, but people coming together in the comfort of their own homes, not having to show up at a community center or not having to show up at a church or some other gathering place, do you see this becoming the norm, the standard? So anyone who launches a campaign is going to want a group similar to Win with Black Women behind them to galvanize voters in their respective
And I would say that part of what's powerful about what we're seeing, even in the immediacy of this moment, is the fact that it's very clear that Kamala Harris is working not only to win, but also to govern, right? So investing, as you said at the top of the hour, investing at those lower race levels to make sure that people are supporting so that she can have the Congress that she needs to make that progress. So for my money, these Zooms that are wrapped around identity are a way for more and more Americans to actually see themselves as political actors. And that's what I see as the parallel between the 1890s and the early 1930s, is that we have gotten away from seeing ourselves as political actors. We have gotten away from understanding the power of our vote, and most importantly, the power of our community conversations. And what the Zooms are doing is reinvigorating the fact that when we're in community conversation, we can have the conversation we need to figure out what's my little piece that I can do. And if we all are doing that piece, then we can make a difference. The other reason why I am so excited by this moment as relates to my research is that, to your point, being in private spaces like Zoom or at your home is exactly what I was studying in Living with Lynching, watching Black women create a safe space for these important conversations that activated them in the public sphere. So it's a reminder that I am worthy of having more political rights. I've got to gather myself privately before I turn out publicly so I can have that strength. And that's what we're watching.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That privacy point, I think, gets lost on a lot of people, but a lot of people aren't comfortable volunteering for campaigns. They maybe feel like they don't have the time. Maybe they feel like there's nothing to offer. I know I got the email, Joteka, from a lot of folks who I know are not politically active normally, but they were inspired to have even been invited, and they felt like, this was an opportunity for them to join something that was bigger than them, and that they could participate kind of at their own level, at their own pace, and it wasn't going to be high pressure. They could be anonymous in many ways. Obviously, 40,000, 90,000 people, one person isn't going to draw a ton of attention. So it really did create an opportunity for, I think, women, and now we know men and all kinds of people, to gather in a safe space to do something that obviously is transformative. Thank you so much, Joteka, for your leadership. Thank you for organizing in the way that you have been doing, not just on July 21st, but as you said, for the last I'll say 20 years of your life, because whatever those other jobs were, they were clearly preparing you for this moment. And thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for your insightful article. Really appreciate your insights as well. Next voice that you hear will be Robin Ayers and the Raw Report right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us. Thanks.
They shouldn't be allowed because they improperly submitted petition signatures. Protesters are calling for the closure of Trousdale Turner Correctional Center. Demonstrators gathered in Hartsville